Kansas City finally had a laugher. An easy win. 2-touchdown victory courtesy of the Turnover Factory, the bakery of Geno Smith. You get a turnover, you get a turnover, you get a turnover. 21-7. Another error-prone performance by the Cleveland football team. The story here, though, don't bury the lead, my man. The story here is the health of the franchise quarterback. So let us discuss the question, where is the Maller worry-o-meter? The Maller worry-o-meter on Patrick Mahomes' ankle in Kansas City. So I have Rice-A-Roni, Glass Slipper, and Aloha Spirit. And we will combine all of these things together, and we are going to make a special offer. Stay tuned for more details. So to kick off here, the Maller worry-o-meter, which is never wrong. Done this a long time. The Maller worry-o-meter is never wrong. 1 to 10, with 10 being, turn out the lights, the party's over. That would be a 10. The Maller worry-o-meter, I am at a 7. I'm at a 7, which is utterly intense, but not as bad as an 8, certainly not as bad as a 9, and definitely not a 10. So I'm at a 7. Now, if I recall a couple years back, Mahomes had a high ankle sprain, and we thought, well, he's cooked. And then he played relatively well, as I recall. So I'm reluctant to go all the way up to an 8 or a 9. I'm reluctant to do that. The reports out of the NFL gossip mill say that it's a week-to-week situation. Here's the problem. Kansas City's in the stretch where they play 3 games in 11 days. Now, they played on Sunday. They've got 2 more games coming up. Remember, they play on Christmas. It's kind of a big deal on that Netflix. So does Kansas City shut Mahomes down for this upcoming game? Do we get Carson Wentz with the hope that he'll be ready to go following that on Christmas? And it's going from Mahomes to Carson Wentz is like going from driving a BMW or a Mercedes and then you're driving a clown car. It's kind of like that, or a golf cart or something like that. But the problem is we don't know the grade. We think we know the grade, but we don't know the grade. And when you have this type of injury, I've done this long enough to know it all comes down to the grading system. Now, if you're Kansas City, you want a grade 1. Grade 1 is stretching, a slight tear of the ligament in the ankle, mild tenderness, swelling, stiffness, that kind of stuff. Grade 2, a more severe sprain, that's a problem. It's an incomplete tear, but still a moderate pain, swelling, all that stuff. Now, grade 3, we know it's not a grade 3. It's not a grade 3, because if it was a grade 3, we would have known about it already. Severe swelling, bruising, unstable, walking not possible. Mahomes able to walk on it, so it's not a grade 3. So it's somewhere between a grade 1 and a grade 2. It sounds to me like a lean towards a grade 2, but slightly, just a little bit worse, or a little bit better than your hardcore grade 2. But you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't know what you don't know. And the recovery timeline for a high ankle sprain for a mere mortal, a weekend warrior, can vary. But generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, it takes between 6 weeks and 3 months to fully heal. So that's a wide span of time. Wide span of time. But let's say it's 8 weeks to fully heal. Well, you can do the math. Here we are in mid-December. The Super Bowl is in mid-February, but you've got to play to get to the Super Bowl. You got to win to get to the Super Bowl and all that. And there are ways you can shorten that. You can use a lot of tape and certain needles and drugs and all that, and there you go. You're on your way. Right? There's things you can do. But I will guarantee you, based on a lot of experience with this, that this is going to be a Rice-A-Roni special for Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes will be using the Rice method. What is the Rice method? It is rest, ice, compression, elevation. Rest, ice, compression, elevation. That is the quarterback treat. Going to try to reduce the swelling, alleviate the pain, and NFL teams have endless amounts of money, so they'll get all the top thingamajigs and whatchamacallits and all the voodoo boogaloo they can for Mahomes. Now, furthermore, we go now to Houston. Is there a coach on the hot seat? Nico Collins. Getting her done. Texans didn't have much offense in this game. They didn't need it, courtesy of the generosity of the Miami football team. Nico Collins and the Texans got past Miami 20-12 in a game that featured a cornucopia of mistakes, most of them by the Dolphins. Miami drops to 6-8 on the season, which all but ends their playoff hopes. Na-na-na-na! Na-na-na-na! Hey, goodbye. See you later. See you later. Now, from our vantage point, things are not going well. But let me ask you from your vantage point, what do you think of Mike McDaniel's job security with the Dolphins? Is he secure or not so much? So he is definitely not secure, even though he agreed to a contract extension in August. McDaniel, based on the way the Dolphins have played, is hanging on by his eyelids at this point. It's not going well. The one thing that McDaniel had going for him was the fact that the Dolphins had been an offensive powerhouse. They were last year when they had Tua. And the excuse had always been, well, the reason the Dolphins are in the position they're in now is because Tua got hurt. But he's back and everything's good. Well, it appears, based on the outside, not being on the inside, just looking at the games here, that Cinderella's glass slipper turned back into a crappy shoe at midnight. That this is a hot mess, right? And that Tua Tagovailoa, he certainly looked like he was suffering from motion sickness in Houston there. The Dolphin franchise quarterback had not one, not two, but 3 interceptions. He also lost a fumble. The Texans scored 10 points directly off those gifts from Tua Tagovailoa. Miami, 5-5 now, 500 in games started by Tua. And all time, they have a terrible record with Mike McDaniel against teams that have a winning record. McDaniel, 1-5 this year against teams that are above 500. And so that continues a trend. And you have linebacker Jordan Brooks of the Dolphins, who this season called the team soft. That was after they suffered frostbite at Lambeau Field. The Dolphin owner is in the final chapter. He's 85 years old. He's in the bottom of the 9th in the game of life. And so Stephen Ross, he's like, you can't take the money with you, right? Once you check out, you go back to zero. So Ross is going to have to cut that cartoon check, and he's going to have to dump McDaniel, who went from the darling of the NFL to a doofus in no time flat and signed another extension and all that, and McDaniel will be an offensive coordinator somewhere around the NFL. But in the AFC East, you are guaranteed to play at least 1, if not 2, possibly 3 cold weather games every single season, because you have to go to New Jersey to play the Jets, you got to go to Buffalo, or you got to go to Foxborough. So you're guaranteed to play a cold weather team. If you're a coach that provides a soft football team, like how's that ever going to work? And in the playoffs in the AFC, you're not going to have home field most likely most of the time. So you're going to have to play in places like Baltimore, Kansas City, Pittsburgh. These are all cold weather outdoor environments. And so Mike McDaniel's put together a soft football team. It seems problematic. If you're allergic to the cold, I get it. You play in Miami, but you can still show some kind of toughness. You do not have to be as soft as the Dolphins appear to be under this guy. And they need someone to shake it up. They got to shake it up there in Miami. And we recommend a red-blooded American alpha male, Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel's available, and I think it would be a good fit in Miami. All right, now, last thing. We head to Nashville, Tennessee, where the country music is good and the football blows. That is where Joe Burrow threw for 271 yards. And not 1, not 2, but 3 touchdowns for Joe Burrow, as the franchise record now, 36 this season for Burrow. The Bengals improved to 6-8, and they keep their faint playoff hopes barely alive by a flicker as after they curb stomped the Titans 37-27 in a El Slapo game. The better story, though, on the losing side, how should the Tennessee Titans handle Will Levis as we advance in the future? Levis was benched in this game after a medley of mistakes. So the answer to the question, how should Tennessee handle Will Levis? Well, we know he's not it. He's got a bazooka for an arm, has no idea where the passes are going. No bueno on this guy. All right, and Levis, 3 interceptions. He lost a fumble. That was the theme. We had the most turnovers on Sunday, most interceptions and turnovers in almost 10 years in the NFL. 51 of them. You got to go back to 2016, the last time it was that bad. But Will Levis, the Bengals scored 24 points. 24 points almost directly off those miscues. Yeah. And Levis was in the captain's chair. He had a view out of the cockpit, and they were riding the Vomit Comet against one of the worst defenses in the NFL. Cincinnati stinks. It's inexcusable to play that poorly against that team. So the Titans, the first thing you do, and they've already done this, they demote Will Levis, put him there, not even as the backup, put him as the emergency quarterback, so get him out of the team. And then you send him on his merry way. He's Mr. Unreliable. Well, in some ways he's reliable, right? Because you know he's good for 2 to 4 brain farts a game, Will Levis, guaranteed. And what they ought to do is live the aloha spirit. Every so often, Hawaii, I've been there many times, I've got married in Hawaii, but our friends in Hawaii, well, Will Levis should be living the island life, not the primetime life, but enough is enough. Forget about Maui. Don't worry about Kauai or Oahu. Will Levis has taken up residency on Suck Island. You know, you're not going to find Suck Island on the map. That doesn't exist, but Suck Island. And you need to act like Hawaii. They do this every few years, about every 10 years. And the homeless in Hawaii, they offer one-way tickets back to the mainland to never return. So the Titans should say, hey, Will, where do you want to go? We'll give you a one-way ticket. Get out of here. And the Titans quarterback can go do whatever he wants. But it really the strategy for the Titans should be ABWL. Anybody but Will Levis. That should be the strategy.